we carry the baggage of our history and the imprinted dynamics, relational dynamics that we're raised with. But we're not determined by them. And so we have to go through a process, as long or as short as it takes, to uncover what those unconscious dynamics and patterns are, and then be free to discard the things that are actually not going to work for you. So in my life, I spoke about this earlier. My parents divorced when I was 17. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in a family that, like, family was the priority. We were Catholic, but like that was a second place to the family. Mm-hmm. And then my parents basically like pulled out the rug from underneath us and kind of showed us like this whole thing has been a big sham. Like, it's all a lie. Family is not the most important thing. Our family certainly is not. So they're ending the marriage. And then I go off to college, and then I have a huge reversion. And then I realize that I want to integrate psychology with the faith. And I also start discerning religious life. When I get into the friars, my family took it really hard. And my dad especially. And, through a series of difficult times in those first 6 months, basically ended up having to like totally separate from my family. And if anybody's familiar with the life of St. Francis, he went through a similar journey where he was raised in luxury and wealth and nobility. And then he had a conversion, and then his father was like, you're crazy. And then Francis stole from his father, and I never stole from my dad, but the father brought Francis to the bishop, and then the bishop told me I had to give the stuff back. And Francis said, here's your stuff. In fact, here, you can have the clothes off my back, because you're no longer my father. The Father in heaven is my father. And I had to go through that transition as well, where I had to like be disowned from my family in order to heal the wounds of what had been misformed and miseducated in me from my family. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's one of the greatest blessings and graces in my life, is that I had the chance to do that in such a deep and radical way, instead of making that be a prolonged experience over like 10 years or 20 years. Mm-hmm. Like, that's where most people are really suffering in their marriages and their parenting. It's like they're still working out how to let go of the wounds that their parents passed on to them.
Even successful. I talk about this a lot with people in spiritual direction, and is if you could treat your parents like you would a stranger, you'd actually be a lot nicer in some situations. You'd actually be a lot nicer to them,
right? A
lot more understanding.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, once there's more of that story with my family. Afterwards, I like reconciled with my dad, and we have a beautiful relationship now. I don't agree with a lot of the things that he says or does, but I don't have this kind of filial need for him to validate me, where I'm actually hurt by the things that are off base. So I have like my identity and who I am and who my real father is. And then I can take the good, because my dad still gives me a lot of great dad things.
Yeah.
But not 100% in a way that I don't have to like be on guard or filter or evaluate or anything like that. And so when there's something that I'm like, that's not quite right, I can accept that. I can love him. I can still be there. Like you said, like, you can treat a stranger better than somebody that you're still like emotionally attached to with these ties and these wounds. So it's an awesome thing to really progress through that, and then to find that you can be free from the miseducation that we receive. I talk about the family, like the church calls it a school of love. And in most cases, we're miseducated in the school of love that we're raised with. So we have to go through a process of re-education. Mm-hmm. Once we learn that there's a better source of truth to apply ourselves to, then we can go back and again, accept the things that were good, reject the things that were bad, and still have good relationships.
And I have a theory, even so my situation, a lot of stuff I've had to work through wasn't huge ways like faults of my parents. But I think everybody has to encounter the reality. At some point when you're a kid, you encounter the fact that your parents are capable of evil, that your parents are capable of sin, or you encounter the fact that there's sin in the life of your parents. And I think that there's a sense that that always startles you. That always, like, you have to undo that. You have to recognize that your parents are capable of evil. I think even Jordan Peterson gets into, you have to come, he says, in adulthood, and I had to come to this place, you have to come to the maturity that authority and your parents are just as fallible as you, that they
Mhm.
can make mistakes. And yet there's a certain, you have to recognize, and I'm trying to think how I would say in my own life, where I had to recognize that my parents had one opinion among many. My bishop has one opinion among many. They may be right some of the time. They may be wrong some of the time. And just being okay with that. I'm not sure, yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And that's really hard. Like when you get into, especially with the church,
Yeah.
and then you have a bishop, it's like, wow, like that's really deep. And that's almost, in some ways, it's almost more intense than a father of your family, because now we're talking about your spiritual identity. But if you go into that, it's like, well, yeah, that emotional vulnerability is going to be there, and you have to accept that. So it's true, because we're born into a state of total dependency, and the only concept that we have of God is our parents. So but we still have this innate sense that we're made for perfection, out of perfection. So we expect to be loved with perfection, and any slight misstep is a wound.
Yeah.
And that, like, I have so many patients that, like, they have a hard time accepting that they're going to be looking at the imperfections of their parents in the process of therapy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, listen, we gotta cover this right up front. We're not here to just spend all of our time blaming our parents. We're here to illuminate where there's been a miseducation. And just to, like, level the playing field here, as a father of 5 children, I can tell you, I promise you, that I'm wounding my children.
Yeah.
And I pray every night as I bless them for St. Joseph to be in their lives and correct the errors of my fatherhood and make up for all the things that I'm doing to miseducate my children in the school of love.
Yeah.
So, like, I accept that about myself. It's a part of everybody's story. Unless your parents are literally Mary and Joseph, you're not being raised in the perfection of Jesus. So we have to, like, put light on that and figure out where that miseducation, that malformation has taken place. This is why the spiritual life has to be incarnate. It has to be integrated. We are uniting ourselves to a human being named Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
a divine being, but in his humanity. And
Yeah.
we're uniting ourselves to this person, Jesus, who was raised in his humanity by a human mom, a human dad, in a perfect way, so that his humanity was perfect. We have imperfect humanity. It needs to be remolded, reformed. Our old hearts have to be replaced by new hearts. We have to decrease that he might increase. That's the union with Jesus. And it's not just a spiritual reality.
Yeah. I
It's
would
going to be
say
our humanity.
absolutely. And as a parent and as a leader, is building in a recognition that you will fall and building that in your organization, building that in your family. Like, so instead of, if you're a parent, like let's say you're a young parent and you don't say, I hope I never let my kids down. I hope I never do anything that hurts my kids. A better reaction would be, what am I going to do when I hurt my kids or when I let my kids down? How am
Yeah.
I going to handle that? And then as
Yeah.
a leader, like, so I have these focused missionaries coming in. We're all excited. It's going to be great. And I told them, I said, there's going to be a problem sometime within the next, I mean, especially if we're successful. I said, chances are, I believe what's going to happen is you're going to be successful. You're going to have a multiplying effect. And there's going to be some problem that arises because of that. And I was like, just be prepared for it. Like, prepared. At some point, we're going to have a disagreement. There's going to be a crisis. There's going to be a tension, and just be prepared for it. Don't expect things to be perfect. Like, and kind of building that into your thinking.
Absolutely. It takes that initial humility. And then it takes a desire for transparency and self-awareness. So like you have to be willing to put in the time. You have to be willing to turn towards the things that are really uncomfortable, because looking at yourself is really uncomfortable when you're thinking, especially about your imperfections. And then there's that humility of acceptance of like, yeah, I'm going to make a mistake. And it's not even just like, what am I going to do? That's got to be part of it in the beginning. But then like the answers are pretty static. It's like, well, we have to acknowledge our mistakes. We have to apologize for our mistakes. We have to seek reconciliation and forgiveness. So the ongoing problem is a daily awareness. It's like the examine. Like every evening we should be thinking about, how did I mess up today?
Yeah.
And assuming that you messed up.